Rob Sanderson is as well this morning. He's a semantic architect at the Getty Trust. Then we have a colleague who came all the way from London to be with us today, Luca Carini, at the end of the table over there. It's a senior web developer in digital media at the Victorian Museum. And finally, we'll have Deborah Howes. You all know Deborah. We're super glad to have her on our panel this morning, and she has been consulting for a project, a MOOC project, with the National Gallery of Art in DC. And that's my first job. I'm going to turn it over to Stefano.
Thank you, Stefano. I'll try to make a presentation about an imaging technology without images. Let's start with a platitude. Images and other audio-visual media are a key component of cultural heritage information on the web. And I'm not just talking about social media contents, I'm talking mostly about high resolution, high fidelity contents that scholars and enthusiasts use to enhance their knowledge, to continue their study and their interest in the topic. And as keepers of human heritage, museums have the responsibility to provide access to these contents, and this access has to stand the test of time. Their contents must be accessible not just within the next month or year, they must be permanent and reliable. IIIF is an attempt to resolve this problem. It's a community-driven effort that responds to the needs for a stable and a universally understood platform that delivers, shares, discovers images, audio, video, and text on the web. The IIIF is a consortium too of institutions that are dedicated to the development of several aspects of IIIF. IIIF is made of some API specifications that are drafted by its editors, and there are 4 of them. One is specifically aimed at image delivery, the so-called image API. There is a presentation API that is focused on content structures, so how to find the context around the images and how they're organized and so on. One API that is focused on accessing the contents, and another one that is about searching and discovering images on the web. The other job of the IIIF community is to develop software implementations for these specifications, because as we know, specifications without implementations are worth nothing. So there are several tools that implement IIIF. They're all, or maybe almost all, open source. I believe they're all open source and mostly, anyway, community driven. And there are this software to deliver content, the so-called image servers. There are image and multimedia viewers. There are a number of them. There are annotation servers, and there are also solutions to integrate with existing dams and content management systems. So to provide a richer image and multimedia experience within the existing tools that you might already know. Third, there is a community and an ecosystem made out of contributors, adopters, and service providers. They all make up the larger IIIF community. So now, IIIF is great for scholarship, as as I introduced, but that's not the only reason why museums should be interested in it. So if you can imagine a world where you don't have to reinvent the means and format to deliver your contents every couple of years, or where you can ask the same machine-friendly question to a number of unrelated institutions about a topic, and each of them will respond in a consistent way about what it knows about a topic. Where switching dams or web content management system platform won't break all your image links. Where you can build a rich user experience as a thin, fast turnover, throwaway layer rather than a heavy, expensive throwaway layer. And the IIIF community is there. It's in the work today. It's real, or they're getting there, and you can join anytime. That's where you can find more information about IIIF, IIIF.io. And a short mention about our IIIF MCN Special Interest Group. We are a group of IIIF community members who are specifically, MCN attendants, MCN members. It's like any other SIG. You can join if you're interested in the IIIF discourse. We have several meetings that are related mostly to the IIIF museum group within the broader IIIF community. But you can join those calls. We have a Basecamp platform where you can see our messages, participate, and ask questions. Thank you.
Right. So let me introduce you quickly to the Yale Center of British Art. It's a small-size museum, really, out in Connecticut. But I thought I would present a little bit the collection because it's probably somewhat related to what you're used to at your museum. We have a reference library and art collection, but also archives, and so those are some of examples of what we can find at the museum. Objects, cared in different departments, but yet they need to be able to be brought together and studied together. So the YCBA is and has been a IIIF core founding member since 2015. And we have essentially layered on the website the IIIF functionality. So up until 2015, the website, this is the online collections catalog, looked exactly like this, minus the IIIF icon there at the bottom. We are now using the Image API 2.0, Presentation API 2.0 with the Mirador viewer. And we have enabled IIIF for all objects that are in the public domain. And right now we're mostly using IIIF to conduct conservation research, as in this example here. So with cross-section of paint samples, comparing that to various paintings in the collection. So when we talked about the panel earlier, we thought we would have questions that everybody would go through. And so that's what I have addressed in my part of the presentation. And I hope we come back to those questions as a larger group later on at the end, and we can debate and talk about that. But mostly the driving force behind implementing IIIF at the YCBA has been that it's really in good alignment with the overall institutional mission. And for some time now, we have used technology to help with the dissemination of our collections information. So IIIF fit just perfectly well in this landscape. The other big driving motivation was to try and answer our users' frustrations when they are using images. I think so far there are a lot of technology out there that has been essentially isolating users in little groups, but bringing all of them together into one platform, one tool, that's been a little bit more difficult. So IIIF is starting to answer that conundrum. How do we use it? Very quickly, comparing images. It sounds simple, but it's still very much one major use case for us. Deep zoom is fantastic. Having a flexible image layout in Mirador is beautiful, and I have 4 images here. I could string so many more different layouts like this. This is an example, a little bit more complicated, of how we use annotations to think about all the different layers of conservation images at the center. And you see the icon, the tab up there for layers, and I can turn on and off all of those. What's interesting here is that each annotation, which is a small detail overlaid on the overall canvas, is very high resolution. I can dive in even more so in those annotations. Of course, it's beautiful to be part of a global network of images. That really speaks to the idea of collaboration between GLAMs. And of course, we're very happy that our content can work in other people's viewers. So here I have on your right, the image of a sculpture in the YCBA collection, and that's embedded in the Mirador viewer from the Bodleian. And that's one of their images there on the left. Again, being part of this open and distributed community is really fantastic. It's really leveraging kind of the collective wisdom, right? And not have to put resources or costs, towards updates or developments like this. What's going to happen next few weeks, next few months? The IIIF Community Consortium at large has just hired its first managing director, who is Josh Hadrow, who will be at the IIIF technical meetings in Edinburgh in December, early December. And just quickly talking about challenges, what we have faced in terms of rolling at IIIF at the YCBA. It hasn't been on an institutional level because I think we were already so converted in terms of giving access to our digital resources. And IIIF, again, just was one more way to give access to those. We've had a little bit of a hard time with our digital infrastructure or architecture, but that's really due to our setup, the way we harvest the collection information from TMS, our collections database, and Cobalt. The image API was not much trouble at all. The only thing I would mention maybe as a minus for now, but I know the IIIF community is working on it, is this drag and drop functionality through the IIIF logo. That's not the only way to bring manifests into a viewer. You can just copy the URI or the URL for the manifest. But again, what are we looking at in terms of the future for IIIF? But I'm sorry, I'm happy to say that actually Yale at large is looking at IIIF as a way to enable cross-collection discovery across several units on campus, libraries, archives, and museums. And I've listed here a few projects that are actively thinking about implementing IIIF. You might have heard of Pharos. And I know the American Art Collaborative had a panel earlier today, or yesterday. We're also thinking about our aggregator friends and how IIIF can become a tool to collaborate better with them. And that is it. I think in conclusion, I would really want to emphasize that the methodology we use to share digital resources, with the network really matter, and that's my departing point.
Good morning. I just want to say, can you hear me in the back?
Yes.
I just want to say thank you for coming so early in the morning to talk about IIIF. It's very heartwarming. And as an interloper into the IIIF Society, they've been very welcoming to me as an educator. And that's probably why, if anyone does know me, that's why they know me. Because like, what is the educator doing over here? And I just want to say that in terms of where we are with the amazing technological tools and the enormous need that each of our museums feel of serving so many different audiences and so many different platforms. Personally, I think there's a huge amount of value in looking at IIIF. I know that every institution right now can't afford all of the trappings that are necessary, but I do feel that very soon we'll be coming up with collaborative formulas that's going to make it much more affordable and doable for museums of all sizes. So that's just a start from someone who doesn't come from the technical point of view, but is often working in between technical and visitor perspective. That's really my point of view in also sharing this sort of little discovery with you. Maybe some of you will identify with some of the points that I'm going to bring up, which is that when my job is often this. We do this in the museum, or we teach this way in the museum. How can we do this online? That's usually the reason why somebody calls me or sends me an email. And so in the case of the National Gallery of Art, one of my very favorite institutions, you know, here's an example. Like if somebody wants to have just a lovely experience wandering the galleries, doesn't know any artist names or any name of a painting, it's very unlikely they're going to go to the information desk and say, my favorite color is blue and I'm really fond of roosters. Do you have anything for me to look at? Like that just doesn't happen, but that is what we tell visitors when they come to our website. We have 40,000 high-resolution images all here for you. Have fun. Go find something that you really like. That isn't, it's what we do. We know how to find what we're looking for. It is not how we experience, visitors experience the museum most of the cases. And in terms of why are we asking you know, non-expert people to find our resources, well, it's to have great experiences, it's to have memories, it's to exercise a different part of our brain. Maybe even we're part of the calm technology that we heard about yesterday. So in this case, one of the audience segments that I work with pretty often, very closely, and I encourage you all to think about this too, are teachers. And some of you probably come from academic institutions, and those teachers are great too. But I really focus on K through 12 teachers, and they're an audience that museums are absolutely dedicated with. If you do anything in your education departments, I'm pretty sure you have field trips coming to your museum. And the thing here is that what we really, museums who are, you know, the forward thinkers, and I count the NGA as one of them. I'm sure there's somebody from the NGA here, but decades ago, they identified teachers as being really important audience sector to focus on. And they were right. How many here remember Ruth Perlin talking about video discs at MCN? Like these things have been happening for decades in terms of getting high technology resources out to teachers so they can connect with the museums. And today is no different. The NGA does hundreds of teacher workshops and training sessions with not only local teachers, but they have an annual special event for teachers to come and learn how to use their collections in the classroom. And so the challenge is, how do we take this fantastic experience that we offer for free to teachers and put it online to make it into an online experience that every teacher, no matter where they are, I mean globally no matter where they are, and whether they have access to the museum or not, can come. And although we might just think, okay, well, there are all these school children that will take advantage of that, teachers are great multipliers. Their families themselves often, they'll get different perspectives on what museums can and can't do and have different experiences. So it's not just about reaching the students, but it's about planting seeds in various parts of our visitor base that very often grow into trees and forests. So just to go back to the task at hand, well, who you see center in the green shirt is Julie Carmine, and Julie is the Associate Director of Teacher Development Programs, and she's my lead contact along with Sarah Lesk. And she's speaking with Sherry Tushman, who is from Project Zero at Harvard University. And much of the pedagogy that NGA bases their teacher training on comes right out of Project Zero's working called Artful Thinking. And if you don't know anything about it and you're interested in how education is using art as ways of striking conversations and most importantly teaching critical thinking, that's the place to go. Project Zero, Artful Thinking. So I'm not going to make you learn this, but I just want to give you a sense of what happens when you're in an artful thinking workshop. You're learning how to observe and describe art. You're using your observations to build into sort of reasoning. And the reasoning happens as a collective group. And then you're questioning and investigating the reasoning that you've just developed. So as you can see, these are difficult things to transfer to an online environment. And underneath the circles that I just walked you through, these are the routines that we use to elicit the kinds of conversations that we need to have. Now, probably none of you work in classrooms, but one of the most difficult things that a classroom teacher has to do is help their students, which could be 25 or more at a time, build their intellectual skills. And what Harvard is saying is that when you use these routines routinely, you're able to assess how the students are progressing intellectually. And so what they found is that the thing that really works well is getting them to talk about art. So they start with art, not in the way that I would, leading a public tour, this is the name of the artist, this is what the history of this painting is. They start with, what do you see? Describe what you see. Spend time with this painting, describe what you see, and then compare to each other what you're saying. And then the conversation leads from there via the routines that you see below. So this works for all ages of students. And one of the very first things that was thrown my way as the challenge was, okay, so the first thing we do is we have people look for a full minute at a painting, and then they have a conversation about it. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we're doing this in a MOOC platform. Has anyone taken an online course in like edX or Coursera? Terribly boring platform, terribly limited. I was like, how am I going to get someone to look for a whole minute at this platform? It's not going to happen. So fortunately, at the very same time I was struggling with this, Alan Newman, who oversees digital services at the at the National Gallery, who I used to work with at the Art Institute of Chicago, said, "Oh, wait, did I tell you? We're just launching all of these images in IIIF, and I think maybe it could be helpful." And so I'm like, "You're kidding? Like, what is IIIF? I have no idea." Okay, so I go to a conference. And people are very welcoming to me. And I'm sitting in places and I'm asking questions that people don't have answers to, but they're interested in the questions. That's what I'm telling you. It's a very welcoming environment. And now I'm a regular to the webinars that happen. And I want to just take you into a peek of what it looks like. So this is you're actually in right now. It's live. Can you believe it? I'm doing this live. This is the boring platform I was talking about. There you see Sherry Tishman. If I clicked on that, you would hear a whole video about artful thinking, but you don't need to. And this is about as interactive as you get, multiple choice questions. Yeah, it's really great. But with a simple iframe include statement, I was able to construct something that you'll find maybe familiar. So this is actually a Mirador viewer in the edX platform. I used no programmers whatsoever to do this. It is coming straight from the NGA server. And what we tell the teachers, I can do this, but it's actually more impressive to do it this way. And while we're looking at this image, sorry, I should have done it. We didn't have time to practice, obviously. So one way I get people to stay for a minute is I give them an option to hear a music track.
Look carefully at this high-resolution digital image of this painting. Let your eyes scan the whole
I'm not going to play
surface
the
of
whole
the
thing, but you
canvas.
got the picture that as I
You might
follow
start at
the
the top
track,
of the image
I can
and
explore
look
the
from
painting.
left to
A
right
minute goes by in
and
no
right
time.
to left.
So
Next, move
that's
down
just one
to the
example
middle.
of how IIIF, and as a content developer, I have to say, I don't have to type any information. All of this authoritative is coming directly from the NGA server. It is enormously useful, and I think that goes to your point, Stefano, about being a very flexible, useful environment for people like me who are often publishing on platforms that I don't control. There's no way that edX is going to make a special exception for me to be able to use IIIF. But it means that I can make that course much more rich and enticing very easily. So that's really what I wanted to show you. And the course will be coming out in January. There's postcards at the back if you want to keep a track of it.
Yeah. So, good morning everyone, and thank you for coming. I'm talking a little bit about our use of IIIF at the Getty, but this section, as you can probably guess if you know me, is going to be a little bit more technical rather than the previous sections. So, of course, we use IIIF in our museum collection pages. You can see the little icon down in the bottom there, and no need to demonstrate Mirador and the sort of off-the-shelf viewing potential that IIIF gives you. You've already seen that with Emmanuelle's demonstration. So, of course, with Mirador as a comparison, multiple up viewer, we can have our objects presented alongside objects from all around the world, such as the institutions here, but also your own institutions if you were to adopt the work. There's multiple viewer implementations, it's not just Mirador. There's about 10 different implementations with different user interfaces designed for different audiences. Our implementation at the museum, so this is already going to start getting into some of the technical bits and bobs, was cheap and fast. And you can predict what the third one is that it isn't. So we use the presentation API to present the metadata about the objects, and it can use the sort of curator and registrar approved labeling. So we didn't need to go to any particular effort to get approval from the curators because they'd already done it for the website. That's one of the benefits of the IIIF way of doing things, that you have full control over the presentation of the descriptive information. So it's not a metadata system, it's a presentation system. Our image API implementation in the museum did not have to create any new image derivatives. We just use our existing OpenSea Dragon tiles and redirect the web request through to it from the IIIF API. It's built into our homegrown layer on top of DMS that was already there. So it was really a case of maybe 3 days of work to be up and running. So when I say cheap and fast, it really was cheap and fast. We have all of our open content available, which is about 30,000 objects. Again, no need to worry about the legal questions about can we do this? It's already been approved, so we just went ahead and did it. However, the Getty has multiple programs, including the Getty Research Institute, and the GRI also uses IIIF, but needs a more full implementation, so a full level 2 implementation that you can have arbitrary regions, you can do rotation, and all of the clever image actions that you can think of. There are hundreds of thousands of objects from digitized archives, and unfortunately, many of them need authentication because we're either not certain about the copyright status, or they contain information about living people, and hence you need to be on site in order to interact with them. We did get approval from legal that a thumbnail was available and should be available publicly. So we used the authentication API to do that gating in a way that's fully compatible with the viewers. So we have a pipeline then that merges data from multiple systems to produce the presentation API, and a second pipeline that takes the images out of Rosetta and puts them online in Amazon for horizontal scaling, such that we can ensure a consistent and robust delivery mechanism. This is our institutional architecture, sort of 50,000 foot view. You know, there's science, there's images, there's books, there's photography, there's text, and there's archives. All of those go into a broader ecosystem, and then we enable consistent access to that ecosystem rather than to the individual systems one by one. And IIIF is a core part of that consistent access mechanism. So the applications there on the right-hand side interact with linked open data, they interact with IIIF, and to provide custom viewing experiences using core components that are shared between all of them. So a roadmap for us for IIIF. Phase 0 is hire someone good, which we have just done. Phase 1, which we are starting on, is sort of the fundamentals to get institutional support across all of the different programs for a robust image server fed from all of our digital asset management systems rather than just Rosetta, but only static manifests, so ones that are generated by a pipeline and made available. Phase 2 is to integrate authorization beyond the simple are you on site or not, and to thus have user accounts and so forth. Particularly integrating with our institutional Active Directory, so that if you are a member of staff or have a Getty account, you can then log in with your OneID and get seamless access regardless of whether you're on site or not. That then, of course, means that we need authentication aware viewers rather than just the one that we have today. The third phase is more dynamic nature, so implementations of annotation so that we can get feedback and create comments for the viewing in different environments. The search API, which I must clarify, is about searching within an object once it's been discovered, rather than a discovery API for finding objects. So for example, if you're interacting with an archive that you've found, and you want to know where in the archive it talks about a particular artist, that's what the search API is for. It's not finding the archive to begin with. We'll then have a presentation API server that can manage identities and ensure that the objects are linked correctly and persistently. The fourth phase is external integration. So that includes the discovery mechanisms to enable aggregators to come and know when our content has changed. Computational enhancement, so things like Google Cloud Vision. If we enable that on top of our IIIF images, we can then ingest the results back into our system to make it more discoverable. And user-specific collections, so if you have a favorites list, we want that to be IIIF just the same way as our collections that we make with the curators, our IIIF collections. In terms of participation in the community, we try to be as active participants as we possibly can. Our Chief Digital Officer and Vice President, Rich Fagan, is on the Executive Committee. I'm on the editorial board that Stefano mentioned, and I'm the chair of the Technical Specification Group for Discovery. We're a full member of the consortium, and if the $10,000 price tag for being a full member has been a bit scary, we've also introduced a new associate member, which is only $2,000. So if there's something that was holding you back from the sort of 5-figure price tag from being a member of the consortium, there are now options. But a lot of our effort has been, over the last year, has been in the version 3.0 APIs, which we, the community, hope will be available in the first couple of quarters next year. So what's happening with version 3? Improved audio and video is the biggest change and the biggest improvement. So we heard over the last 3 to 4 years, after doing many IIIF presentations, the first 2 questions were, what about authentication? And we've solved that one. The second question was, what about audio and video? We've got all of these audio assets. How can we make them just as capable as our image assets? So with version 3, we've integrated duration into the presentation API, so that instead of just having a static image that you can zoom in and out of, which is so lovely, you can also just hit play, and it will go through a video, it will play an audio track, but it can also do things like showing particular annotations at certain points in time, synchronized with the audio and video. So that gives us subtitles and captions via those annotations in a robust and internationalized way. It allows recomposition of audio, video, image, and text. So imagine if you've got a video recording of this presentation and the camera goes down, you can then start again and stitch them back together using the presentation API, rather than getting into the digital asset management system, pulling out the videos, loading them up in whatever the Adobe product is, putting them back in, and so forth. There's already several implementations of this. The British Library and the Girardi have implemented both client and server. Indiana University with their Avalon work has implemented both. And in Japan, a lovely consultant has implemented a very rich video client for his patrons. So, as you can imagine, both for the educational perspective, but also for exhibitions, where you're sort of telling a story, having this notion of duration and time is going to be a massive improvement. The other major area of change for version 3 is developer happiness. So we've tried to simplify the APIs wherever possible. We've heard it's too complex, and we've listened. So there's easier patterns for navigation. We removed some of the features that seemed like a good idea at the time, and maybe had a little bit of use, but were never really well supported. We've also focused on having cookbooks of recipes. So instead of coming with, here's the spec, okay, you have to understand it and figure out what to do, instead you come with a use case and you find the appropriate recipe of how to fulfill that use case using the specifications. We've tried to round off the sharp corners by better explaining the confusing parts and looking at how the development practices have happened, and then trying to make those practices easier to do. And attention to implementation details such as the cardinality, how many times can you see this particular feature, the data types, is this always an object, is it sometimes a string? We're trying to make that more consistent. And fixing clarity, fixing the lack of clarity around some of the user interface behaviors that were expected, such as for the version 3 things, what happens if you have a repeating audio track? Should it repeat always, or should it go to the next one and then go back, and so on? So try to make it clear as to what the implementation should do. Timeline for version 3, at the Edinburgh meeting in a couple of weeks we'll ratify the beta, which we expect to be also the final version, unless in the first quarter when we start to deploy the infrastructure we run into some significant issue that we haven't yet come across. Second quarter will be to sort of finalize everything, wrap up all of the loose ends and publish it, with the intent of having a launch party at the IIIF conference in Göttingen in June of next year. So thank you very much. Here's the IIIF URI once more, and I'll hand over to Luca from the V&A to show some super interesting stuff.
Hi, I'm Luca Carini, front-end developer, and I'm over from London at the Victorian Objects Museum.
Yeah, I think the mic is important.
Oh, sorry. Can I do that? Up my hands. Okay?
Better.
Better? Yeah. I'm Luca. I'm over from London at the Victorian Objects Museum. V&A has a broad collection of about 2.4 million objects and library items, about 40% of which have digitised images, plus archives, all of which needs to be accessible online. We also put on immersive exhibitions, which we strive to reflect and enhance with engaging digital features. But many of our web features in the past had content and data that was siloed off, often even locked into its own technology, meaning it didn't always always survive shifts in technology or even site rebuilds. We needed a much better way of recording and serving this content, and IIIF is solving many of our problems. These are a few examples of the web features on our site at the moment, which now use IIIF APIs to present images along with their descriptive content and annotations in different viewers to suit the content. Another type of object I found in our collections recently are these objects called peep shows. They're Victorian objects, and they were popular as tourist mementos, and they were almost an early version of a virtual reality in a way. They're trying to recreate a three-dimensional scene using separated two-dimensional layers. In our collections management system, the layers are recorded as parts of the object in sequence with their associated images similar to pages of a manuscript. Standard IIIF manifest for the object is readable by any IIIF viewer, which I think you saw at the beginning, shown in Mirador, the viewer you've already seen. There they look more like pages of a manuscript. That's just cycling through the pages in Mirador, shown perfectly accurately as you'd want. But this is a prototype viewer I've made to show them differently and sort of recreate the original effect of the peep show as intended. But the point being, the original assets were preserved, not duplicated, no new variants made for the viewer, and it's still correctly, the manifest for this object will still correctly represent the object in Mirador or any other viewer.
That's a great thing to see. That's really nice.
Well, it really protects the paper.
Yeah. Excuse me. This is another demonstration of the image and presentation APIs being used together. This time to view different regions of the same primary source image in a set sequence to reanimate Edward Muybridge's studies in animal locomotion. So the primary source image that we have in our collections management system are these plates, the way he produced them, with all the, like a grid of the stop motion frames. So again, we can provide an engaging interpretation without the need to produce bespoke variants of the original asset. Instead, we can record a sequence of regions to display from the same source image. And show those in sequence in a viewer. So the original, all we have to do now is continue preserving the original asset and some data to record its interpretation in a standardized way. And that means we can justifiably spend more time developing more engaging ways to access our collections. Like that. And to the conference theme of humanising the digital, we're just about to release what we're calling image tours as a way of adding narratives to images and breathing more life back into digitised snapshots. This is a sort of a mock-up that I made just to demonstrate it here. but it's a viewer that we're developing. It's an open source viewer, developing it with the aforementioned Digerati, hoping for further collaboration to extend it for other uses, one of which we're already developing ourselves, which is more of a multi-slide viewer, so we'll be able to add narrative around collections of objects and their images. That's me.
Are there any questions, observations? Are there microphones? Or maybe you guys can use the microphones. Oh yeah, there we go.
Those V&A examples are gorgeous.
Oh, thanks.
It's like sitting on the edge of my seat here. What? Thanks for sharing. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it doesn't look like we have viable microphones, so speak up if you have any questions.
So maybe just to start us off, who is completely new to IIIF? Who is just, yeah. Well, thank you for coming this morning. I hope that was interesting, inspiring. And who is is looking at specs and thinking, I could probably do that. Yay! Chris, you have to speak up.
What might those costs be? There was a mention of the cost of setting up.
Yeah.
You mentioned the cost of setting up.
Yes, there was a mention of the cost of the track of setting up.
Want to start? I can start for the Art Institute. I didn't mention our implementations at the Art Institute. We had some learning curve. The cost was the learning curve for the developers. Of course, as I mentioned, all the tools are open source and free to use. You need the developer resources to implement, to set up the software. That depends on the software that you are interested in implementing. There is a variety of solutions for every part of IIIF. So we use, for example, for our image server, we started with Loris because we were proficient in Python. That didn't quite work for us after a while, and in exactly a week, we switched to another image server without migrating the images, without changing the API clients. We just switched the software. Most of the time was spent in testing. Same thing with the viewers. Viewers are probably more complex, and you probably want to just leave them alone and implementing the way they are. So they're mostly JavaScript-based viewers. So we had relatively modest costs. Maybe a significant part of the cost was to migrate the images to a format that was viable to the IIIF experience. That means transforming or converting our images from TIFF to JPEG 2000, and that's about it.
I'd only add on the point about the images that we're expecting to, incur increased hosting costs for the pyramidal version of the images, which are that much larger. But I think it's an investment for the good.
Yeah, and our costs were some initial development time, as I mentioned, it was only it was less than a week of work to be up and running. But overall, I would say the area where it requires the most software hands-on is getting from your collection management system to the presentation API, because everyone has different patterns and requirements from curatorial staff and legal staff, etc., as to how things are presented. So that sort of customization needs some attention, and isn't really, it's very hard, it would be very hard for that to be off the shelf and acceptable to the individual institutions. The image servers, as Stefano said, are very quick and easy to get up and running, and it's just the testing and making sure that the sort of IT infrastructure supports the server code as opposed to the server code needing to be worked with.
Thank you, that was very interesting. Yeah, thank you, that was very interesting. I don't have a particular question, but I just wanted to plug if anyone else was interested in another IIIF viewing experience. The slow looking room is going to be running downstairs all day today, and that's just kind of a drop-in thing. So.
Anyone more questions? Maybe our panelists would like to add a few things. Rob, can you tell us a little bit about upcoming opportunities for meetups with the IIIF community?
Sure. So in December, which is probably too soon now for anyone to change travel plans, there's the IIIF working session. So if you're in the UK and you can make it to Edinburgh for the week of the first week of December, there is an opportunity there. There's the conference coming up in Göttingen in June, but there's also various sort of regional meetups. There's frequently a northeast meetup that sort of moves around between New York and Boston. There's other meetups at the different in different countries as well, not just America. The easiest way to track those is to join the IIIF Discuss Google group, where they are all announced. And if also you have questions, IIIF Discuss is definitely the best way to participate in the community and get those questions answered. Yeah, those are the two sort of big events. There's also opportunities to engage with the community via phone calls. We have a bi-weekly community call on Wednesdays, where people can join and find out what's going on, ask questions, and so forth. And there are the technical groups if you're a techie sort of person. Probably my New Zealand accent made that sound weird. If you're a technical person, then there's discovery is ongoing. The audio-visual work is wrapping up, but future work will be in the area of authentication and improving that not only for images but also for the audio and video, and improving the search such that it takes into account time, so that you can search for subtitles within a region of time, which currently you would simply be taken to the entire video if it was a single resource.
Maybe to this I'll add that the next IIIF Museums community call will be on Tuesday, December 4th at 11 New York time. We usually have short and informal demonstration by other museums of related partners. The next two demos that we have coming up are from our friends in The Hague, RKD, as well as, I believe, somebody who's been working on the latest version of Mirador, who will be coming and showing us the latest developments. So it's a nice informal way to keep up with the development in the community.
Okay, well,
thank you for participating.